Okay, okay. Today, I'm going to be teaching you about how you can use comparing and contrasting in an informational text. This is an important skill to be able to do when you're reading nonfiction and even stories too, but we'll talk about that one later, how to use it inside of stories. So, readers need to be able to read two texts, okay, or more, could be more, and identify the key points. What are the key things the author's trying to teach you? We've talked about those before. What are the key points in both of the texts? Readers also, not only do they have to be able to identify those key points, they need to be able to say how the key points from the two texts are alike each other, which means compare them, and how they're different, which means contrast them. So here's a quick example of what that is, and then we'll jump into another one. So here is passage 1, and here's passage 2. Passage 1 is talking about how animals need water, how dogs bark to convey feelings, and how animals communicate at a more basic level. That's what passage 1 talks about. Those are some of the key points. Here's the key points in passage 2. Humans need water. Humans talk to convey feelings. And humans can read, write, and invent. So, comparing and contrasting means we take a look at each passage and we say what passage 1 has, what's passage 1 have, that passage 2 does not have. And that's called a contrast, something that has contrasting it, so it's not like that one. So what does passage 1 have that passage 2 doesn't have? Well, in passage 1 it talks about how animals communicate at a more basic level. So passage 1, it talks about how they how animals communicate at a basic level. Passage 2 doesn't talk about how animals communicate at a basic level. Passage 2, something that it has that passage 1 doesn't, it says that humans have advanced communication skills. So in passage 2, it talks about how humans have an advanced communication. So I'd write that underneath here because that's something that passage 2 has that passage 1 does not have. In the middle here, that's where we write down what they have the same. So what does passage 1 have? That passage 2 has the same of. So in both passages, they talk about how animals and humans need water. That's something that they have in common. So that's something I can compare and say that's the same. And then I can say that in this one and this one, passage 1 and passage 2, they're talking about how animals and humans share their feelings with other things or people. So something that they have in common is that they share feelings and they need water. Something that passage 1 has that passage 2 doesn't is that the animals communicate at a basic level. Passage 2, something that has that passage 1 doesn't, the humans communicate at a more advanced level. So this is what's called comparing and contrasting. In the middle is where you're saying that they're like contrast is what they have differently. So let's take a look at another example. So here we have two different things. This one is the two types of water. Here we learn about fresh water, and here we learn about salt water. So for fresh water, the water that people can drink. So you can drink fresh water, and it contains a little salt. Okay, and then salt water, the water in oceans. It doesn't talk about us not being able to drink it, but I'm assuming that you can. And then it contains higher concentrations of dissolved salts and minerals. Ooh, too much salt would probably dehydrate you. So that's what the two texts say. So now let's compare and contrast. What do they have the same, and what do they have that's different? All right. So here's the text again. Fresh water, contrasting, different. So what does fresh water have? What does this have that this doesn't? I'd write that here. What does salt water have that fresh water didn't? I'd write that here. So let's take a look. One thing, one main topic or key point in this one that's not in this is that people can drink it without worrying about salt. So water people can drink. So that's a key point made in this passage that was not made in this passage. And then what's a key point that was made in this passage and not in this passage? Contains a high concentrate of dissolved salts and minerals. So that's something that salt water has that fresh water doesn't. So when it's all put together, we can see out here are the things that each passage has that the other passage doesn't. What's in the middle is what both of the passages have together the same. That's where we're going to say that we are going to compare them, say that they're the same. Contrast them, different, different, same in the middle. So what do they have that's the same? Well, they both contain salt. This one has a little bit of salt, this one has a lot. but both passages talk about how the water contains salt. And both passages, this one and this passage, they both talk about a different type of water. So that's how they are the same. As a reader, you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to read one story and a second story, talk about how the first story is different than the second story, and then you have to say how they're the same, how the two stories are the same. So, in your reading, be able to read a story, read a second story, say how each story is different from each other, and then say how the story is the same. Sometimes you'll see these done as circles. So if it's done in a circle, it's the exact same way. The circles on the outside, that's how you're saying that they're different. The circle that's in the middle where they overlap, that's how you're saying that the two stories are the same. Good luck.